everyone. I'm Allison, and I'm here for Where I'm From 95 with Sarah. I'm back on Instagram Live, which is exciting, and currently I'm reading R.F. Kuang's Yellowface, which is a psychological thriller, I think is what you might call it. It's a great book about the writing world and just the stories that the choices that some people make out of desperation, and then the justifications that people use for the decisions they've made. Anyway, it's going to be joining me in just a moment. I've invited her to join me. Hi, Sonia. Here she is.
Oh, come on.
It's your keyboard. So it's you.
It is my keyboard.
Yeah.
Hang on a second.
The mention of you, Sonia, did not jinx it last time. It was some person who just kept trying to join us, I think was what happened. A very persistent person. And then the whole thing just went. So I was like, I'm just going to start over. Just going to start over.
And I don't know what happened. I mean, I think you and I must have both sent each other, like I must have sent a request and you had sent a request, and one of the two sort of canceled the other one out, and then because that's when my video feed stopped.
It all just froze up. So I was like, okay, so you were saying how Sonia is the connector between us, which I guessed because of, were you Sonia's developmental editor? That's not how you say that word, but you know what I'm saying. Developmental.
Yeah. Sonia had hired me to do a developmental edit of her memoir, the one that she had talked about during
Yes, which
her,
I'm very excited to read. I'm just going to say that again. I am really excited to read it.
Yay!
Yeah. So
we're waiting for that to come out into the world, Sonia.
It's a process. I think knowing as many writers as you and I both know, you realize, like, as if you didn't already know if you read a lot, but it's a slow process. Writing a book, getting a book published, getting it into the world, it is not, if you are interested in instant gratification, do not write a book.
Yeah. No, I mean, and remember that hers in particular, she's been working on it for a long time, and we had actually just exchanged a couple of messages before I went on vacation.
To France?
Yeah, to France for our writing retreat.
Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, she also wants to try the traditional route as well, and that takes time as well,
yes.
To find an agent and for them to, if things work out, to get a book deal with an editor and a publisher, and then even then it takes upwards of a year for the book to come out if you do it that way. So it's always a process, no matter what path you take when it comes to writing.
I agree. And I'm currently reading, I was saying as we were beginning, I'm reading R.F. Kuang's Yellowface, which is a great book that I recommend. And it is so much about these kinds of things. And this very frustrated writer who makes a lot of bad decisions.
Yeah. No. I've heard a lot about it.
It is tough to read. Like, it is so well written, and it feels possible. Like, what happens, which is probably not possible, but it's so well written that it makes you like believe someone could almost get away with what she gets so far. I haven't finished the book, so I can't say if she gets away with it or not, but just the way that the main character just increasingly uses really uncomfortable thinking to justify her actions. Like, it's very well done. Very well done.
I just writing a reminder to myself to get it from the library.
Yeah, I think most writers will get a kick. It's like, because obviously Rebecca Kuang has lots of access and is successful, and so she knows the world so well, and it's always fun to read those kind of like insider riffs on things we all have some familiarity with. So it's fun for that reason too. But it's also like, I guess it's a psychological thriller is how you might, because it's just, I really kind of am on the edge of my seat. Like, Oh, what's she gonna do next?
No, it sounds like, and the funny thing is, um, I believe all the other books she's written up until then are fantasy novels. So
Right.
this is like her first foray into something that's not that type of genre fiction. So, and I've read one of her fantasy books, so I'm kind of interested in seeing um, what it's like to read her work in a different
Right.
genre this time.
And I so applaud writer. Well, probably because this is something I've come to over time. But you know that you're allowed to do different things. Like I think oftentimes we're encouraged to just do one thing, and
Mm-hmm.
it's fun to see writers do different
Yeah.
things. I think.
What it reminds me a little bit of the author who so just in case you were going to ask, I also brought a couple of the books that I'm
Sure,
currently
please.
reading
I'm
right now.
asking. Tell me what you reading.
So it's funny you just said what you said a moment ago because right now I am reading Ursula K. Le Guin.
Oh, okay. Well.
It's The Eye of the Heron.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Ursula is one of those writers who did everything. She wrote
Yes.
science fiction and fantasy, but she also wrote poetry.
Yeah.
Some nonfiction
Yeah.
books as well, essay collections, a book on the craft of writing. I'm sure that if she wrote greeting card text, it would be amazing greeting card text. But no, she's one of those writers who has done so many different things and done it really well.
Yeah.
And so I've read most of her well-known novels at this point, so I'm
Yes.
kind of diving into some of her
Mm-hmm.
or at least to me, her lesser known works.
Yeah.
And so The Eye of the Heron, I'm about almost halfway through it at this point. And then because I'm also a poet, I'm always reading poetry books as well.
Mm-hmm. And what are you reading right now?
And of course, one of them is missing at the moment because it's over on my coffee table instead of right here. So anyway, I brought this book with me to France. Mm. It is The Essential Rilke. Mm-hmm. So it's just a collection of some of Rainer.
Maria.
I always forget his full name.
I think it's Rainer Maria.
Okay. Rainer Maria Rilke. I'd always been meaning to read his works, and this is a best-of collection that actually features not just English translations, but also the German originals.
Mm-hmm. Do you speak German?
So it's interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's interesting. That's been interesting to see the comparisons between the two. Not that I really speak any German, but but no, it's always interesting to see what the original looks like, and then the English one beside it. The other poetry books are all by poets who live locally to me.
Oh, neat.
Tarot poems by Michael McAfee. There is one poem for every card in a standard tarot deck in this book.
That's a cool container.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Uncertain Acrobats by Rebecca Hart Olander.
I love that cover.
And
I love that cover.
Yeah, no, it's a very eye-catching cover, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the other one that is somewhere else in the room right now is Story and Bone by Deborah Leipziger. So
that's a lot of books. It
is a lot of books.
You're busy.
That's what I do. That's what I do, especially with poetry, I tend to read the books a poem at a time.
Yeah.
Because I find that for me, that's the best way to really digest each poet's style and just really take my time with it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So would you like to read your poem? On that note, would you like to read your poem?
Sure. All right. So, Where I'm From, after George Ella Lyon. I am from crayons and lined paper, from play school houses and Happy Meal toys. I am from the wooden swing set in the greenest backyard, ringed by pines and oaks, redolent of upturned earth and freshly cut grass. I am from the rhododendron bushes, now twice as tall as me, the dried poison ivy vine I once yanked from an old tree. I am from apple pies and perfectionism, from Shirley and Robert. I am from family road trips to Maine and supermarket sales and coupons, from good job pumpkin to Let mom do it. She knows how she wants it done. I am from the awkwardness of attending church only for weddings and funerals, from the wisdom of oracle card readings that have since proven true. I am from suburban Massachusetts, France, England, and Scotland, from fudgy brownies and chicken parmesan, from the skin cancer that bit into my mother's leg, from my dad's black eye thanks to a baseball bat 2 days before his wedding. In a plastic Disney bag in my bedroom closet lie dozens of old photos I found at my grandmother's house after she died. All the faces are familiar yet younger, including one grinning, glitter-eyed girl crouching beside the sandcastle she built herself. I am from this molding of earth and memory, from that dream-building child who still plays within me.
Yay!
Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I, as is always the case, I have certain memories of my own come up when I'm listening to the poem. But what was first? Let's talk about you. What was the experience like for you writing the poem?
You know, I thought about that question because I watched a
Yeah.
couple of Where
Yeah.
I'm From videos leading up to today. So I wrote this poem last fall
Mm-hmm.
after you and I.
Yeah. You were, yes, it's been in
After
my
you and
inbox.
I.
Well, not my inbox, but my email for a long time.
Yeah, so I wrote it right after you and I touched base about the project last fall, and because I wanted to get it done before I forgot.
Yeah.
So I don't really remember the process too much. I do remember I do remember that I stuck pretty closely to the
To the prompt,
prompt.
yeah.
Um, and it came together very quickly. I mean, there were some minor edits that I made to it in the coming weeks after when I had my critique group look at it.
Mm.
But it came together very quickly. And one of the other things that typically happens when I write poems is I listen to music when I write
Mm-hmm.
poems. Because it sort of helps me. I'm one of those people who has to listen to music whenever I'm working or anything because I find that it helps me concentrate.
Mm-hmm.
And with poetry in particular, it helps me steep in the mood or the
Mm-hmm.
pacing or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is that I want to write. And the piece of music that I picked, if I can find it here, yes. It was just a very quiet, ambient
Mm-hmm.
tune. It's called Healing Forgiveness by Massage Tribe. I think I picked it. I think I picked it mostly because it was very quiet and not very intrusive, so it allowed me to
Mm-hmm.
really sort of focus on what I was writing as opposed to really allowing myself to get into a particular mood or
Yeah.
whatnot. So,
To just kind of let surface whatever felt appropriate instead of having
yeah.
a directive of sorts.
Yes,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, it did feel very, I just, like I said, I felt like you were from Massachusetts. Like I had this feeling of New England from your poem and the green. And so your mother had skin cancer. I also had skin cancer in my leg. So that was one that I was like, oh, I had a bite taken out of my leg from
Yeah.
skin cancer.
Yeah, it happened, it happened, I think it happened before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
And so all I've ever heard about it are the stories. But yeah, I think it happened. My parents were married in 1975. And I think the cancer happened a couple of years after that because they couldn't try to have any kids for about 5 years after her surgery and whatnot because I wanted to make sure that she stayed in remission long enough and it wasn't going to be an issue. So, yeah, I
And what
that's all I really know.
And what
That's
an
all I
evocative
really
way to
know.
say it, a bite. Because especially right after it's done, mine, and probably your mother's even more so, Like, I mean, the skin is not, like, the leg looks different. Like someone took a
It
bite out of it. I mean, that is,
it
I've
does.
never
Like
thought of it that way, but that is accurate to what it looked like.
it is. Yeah, what they had to do was they took skin from her calf and
Mm-hmm.
then grafted it or did
Mm-hmm.
whatever they needed to do on her thigh because it was on her thigh where the cancerous skin cells were
Mm-hmm.
growing. So um, yeah, um, it's sort of one of the reasons why I think she's felt very self-conscious about her legs. She doesn't like to wear she found it very hard to wear shorts,
Yeah.
skirts,
Mm-hmm.
or bathing suits after that. So just because she didn't like to have other people see it,
Yeah.
which I can understand. Um, and
I understand
but it's
it
also
too. I have a big
mhm.
scar, but I did not have a skin graft. But I'm like, this is my scar. I'm here.
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
think that's the other option. I think with older, and I think people my age as well, there is a lot of like wanting to look perfect, whatever that is. And it's like, nobody does. That's not a
yeah,
thing, you know. But I think there was this pressure or this belief that it did exist, and I hope that over time and over generations we realize that whatever we are is, you know. But I think there was this like performing a certain type of desirability.
yeah. And I completely agree with you on that. I also think and this is also generational. I think that there's also a certain thing about hiding
Mm-hmm.
or not really talking about things that are either traumatic or sort of filed under let's not talk about this
Yes,
just because it
private.
brings me shame kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I think a lot that generations now, or even people within my mother's generation who have, I think, evolved to the understanding that it's okay to talk about these things. More and more people are talking about it, whether it's, having conversations or writing books about it and
Mm-hmm.
so on. So, I can understand why it's hard, why it's
Oh, for
hard
sure.
from both of those perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that there comes a point where she doesn't feel that way about it. That, she's not the only one who's got the bite on her leg.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
because of it, she's here.
Hmm.
Because of the bite on her leg, she's here, and she had you, and you have a life, and
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's like proof of I for me. I think because so much of my trauma felt invisible, I almost like thought, well, this scar says something without having to say anything, and I almost
Hmm.
appreciated it. Like this is
Yeah.
something I can show people. Um,
Yeah.
I don't I don't know. Somehow that it helped me externalize
No,
other things.
it makes complete sense.
But
It makes
I get
complete
why she
sense.
doesn't want to. I mean, I just think there's still so much shame with just having our bodies, which are naturally vulnerable, be proven to be vulnerable.
Hmm.
It's like, no, I should be
Yeah.
invulnerable. Like, no, no one is. We aren't.
No.
But there is this expectation, I think. Um,
Hmm.
so that anyway, that was so interesting, and the way you described it hit me, and I'll carry that with me. So thank you.
You're welcome. No, I'm glad. I'm glad that it did that for you.
Yeah. Um, and well, I mean, we're this is sort of where we start to wrap up. Do you have any last thoughts or anything else you'd like to talk about or share about your poem or your
No,
experience or anything?
no, I mean, I know a couple things stood out for me when I was writing it. You it's funny because I write a lot of poetry now, and
Yep.
one of the topics that's always been very close to my heart is the natural world, whether it's looking at writing about what's beautiful or wondrous and so on, sort of like how Mary Oliver did,
Mm-hmm.
but also the climate crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny how a lot, like probably half of that first paragraph is very nature centric. I mean,
Yeah.
nature, I guess I just never really realized how big of a role nature played in my life um, when I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it's just because you focus more on the impact that it has on you as an adult. So sort of writing this poem sort of taught me, oh, wait a minute, it's been rooted in me all along,
Yeah.
which I thought was really interesting.
And the poem
Um,
does such a good job of that, of bringing out that, I think, I mean, the water, the bay I lived on was certainly my first best friend, you know, and
mhm,
but I wouldn't have thought of it necessarily in those terms. And I think, um, what a privilege it is to have a relationship with the natural world, and
mhm.
it helps with everything else. And I thought your description of the rhododendron and the greenery, and um, it's funny because when natural descriptions are not specific, when it's kind of just like, you know, it's sunny out, it doesn't really move me. But when people get into the specifics of where they're from and what it looked like, it
Mhm.
always it transports me for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's funny how, as I was working on the poem, how all these different little stories or details came back from my life. Like
Mm-hmm.
I still remember that day that I was yanking the poison ivy. I remember yanking the poison ivy vines,
Mm-hmm.
and my mother freaking out because
Yes.
she knew it was poison ivy. I
Yes.
didn't.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you now though if I had a case of poison ivy afterward. I don't really remember that.
I was wondering
But
if it was dead or alive, and if you did have a case, like if it was just a, you know, a skeletal vine, or if it was, you know, potentially hurting
I
you or
yeah,
not.
I think I think it was dead. I mean, I remember it being very dry and
Mm-hmm.
brown
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to green and
Yeah.
alive. So,
Like ready to spread
but
its
it
joy.
also, yeah, but it also happened when I was like 4 or 5
Oh,
years old.
wow.
So,
Oh, that's amazing.
yeah, it it might have happened too long ago for me to really remember it now.
Does your mom remember
Um,
it?
she might. I could probably ask her
I'd be
and see what
curious.
happened.
Because you might
Yeah,
remember it because of her response. Like
yeah,
oftentimes it's something like that that puts the little sort of flag in our memory is
yeah,
somebody's response to our actions,
hmm
not the actions themselves.
yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
4 or 5.
Um,
That's a long time.
it is. It is a long time ago. And and also as I was writing, it was funny how certain stories, not from my own life, but from my parents' lives, came back to me too. Like the one that caught most everybody, like my critique partners as they were reading the poem, was the part about my dad's black eye.
Yeah.
I mean, I found out after the fact, after I submitted this poem to you, that it actually happened more than 2 days beforehand, but I
Mm.
opted not to
Mm-hmm.
update the poem, um, just because it is. It was, I mean, it was still very close to the wedding,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, and he had to have stitches and whatnot. But it's just also that shock factor of something, an injury like that happening right before a wedding, and oh dear, now you have to have your wedding photos
Mm-hmm.
taken and whatnot. And I mean, to me, when I see the photos, even now as an adult, it's hard to. I actually find it kind of hard to tell that that it was, that this part of his face was
Mm-hmm.
swollen. But then again, I'm also looking at it from just a perspective of somebody looking at the photos. I don't know how, everybody else in his life back then would have known what he looked like, um, you know,
Yeah. Did he put
before
on
that
makeup?
happened.
Did
Hmm?
he put on makeup?
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look really closely at his face now, you actually can see a very tiny scar along his eyebrow, like
Mm-hmm.
where the cut had healed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, apparently, it sent both families into a tizzy right
I'm
before the
sure.
wedding.
I'm
So
sure. Well, everyone's so on edge before a wedding, and it's so
yeah.
usually can be a great expense, and you want it to
Hmm.
be as perfect as it can be. All of our obsessions with
Yeah.
perfection are very challenging and anxiety producing.
Yeah.
But a wedding
Yeah.
is really that kind of moment. you know?
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure. And it's
Hmm.
funny because it is important in the moment, but I think the longer I'm married, of course, the more it feels like, oh, you know, why did we, why was it such a big deal? Why did we, did we need to do it like that? But there's just kind of this expectation that you're going to do it like that. So we
Yeah.
did. But if one of us had had a
Yeah.
black eye, we would not have been thrilled. Neither would our parents. So I get it.
Yeah.
Because you can
Yeah.
also, especially back then or before digital was a thing, really, like for a lot of people, this was like the photos that you had of this, like with everyone you loved and everyone looked good. And, it was like you'd send them out to people. And I mean, now with digital photography, it's very different. There's photos all the time everywhere, but it was
Mhm.
not like that.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah.
I, I'm sure your mom like, oh, come on.
No, I mean it's one of those stories
Mm,
that's been told many, many times,
yeah.
throughout my life. And so yeah, I think they were just I know she was concerned about things not looking good
Of
in the photos, but I
course.
think in the end she was also more concerned about whether he was
Okay.
okay
Yeah.
uh than that, which but yeah, again, it's just one of those stories that as I was filling out the prompt, I was like, I kind of have to put this in here.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you did. It made me think. I've known a couple of grooms who have had bruises or one who did have to put makeup on because of some bachelor
Hmm.
shenanigans. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's happened
Hmm.
and you go on with it. That's the other thing about a wedding. It's not like you reschedule.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, well, here's whatever condition we are in is the condition we are in, and we are going forward with this party that everyone is here for. So,
And you know what? You know what? Whatever condition I mean, I'm not married, so I can't really speak from any kind of experience, but I mean, my boyfriend and I have been together for almost 4 years, but I mean, there is also sort of a beauty in turning up to an event like that as you
yeah,
are,
for sure.
and you know
Yeah,
who you are in that moment.
yeah, I agree. But it's funny how much pressure there is to do something else. Um,
Hmm.
but well, thank you, Sarah, for joining me, and thank you for your patience. It took a while, but we got here, and we got you right back when you returned from France, and when I'm back on Instagram, so the timing worked out perfectly. So thank you
Yay!
so much, Sarah,
Awesome.
Sarah, for being here.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Thank you so much again for having
of
me.
course. Okay, bye.
Okay. Bye.